Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our Forestry Speed Dating event on unlocking the potential of forest carbon markets with innovative solutions. I'm Siwe Bries. I'm a junior expert at the Bioregions Facility of the European Forest Institute, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator today. The forest carbon markets provide a method for businesses to offset emissions while also offering financial support to landowners for their contributions to forest conservation and restoration. However, the rapid growth of this market highlights the need to ensure reliability and transparency throughout its entire supply chain. The solutions from Skoog and Treemetrics, which we will learn more about today, exemplify how innovative collaborations can thrive within the carbon markets. The Bioregions Facility's Forestry Speed Dating series is a platform that puts the spotlight on innovative bioeconomy solutions. Our aim to drive knowledge transfer, stir collaboration, and foster innovation in the forest-based sector. The first event of the series on carbon markets is an initiative of the Bioregions Facility, which is made possible with the support of our member regions, North Rhine-Westphalia, Basque Country, and Catalonia, all of which are advancing towards a forest-based bioeconomy. We also want to acknowledge our amazing collaborators that you can see in the bottom of the slide, the European Circular Bioeconomy Fund, the European State Forest Association, the Irish Bioeconomy Foundation, Bioeconomy Ventures, and Ubuntu. Today we're having Skoog and Treemetrics, two innovative companies providing solutions aimed at monetizing forest carbon. And as they embark on their journey within the carbon markets, they're keen to forge new partnerships, connect with potential customers, secure funding, and identify pilot testers to refine and enhance their carbon markets solutions. So now I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for today's session. Please welcome Augusto Andrade, the CEO and co-founder of Skoog. He's here to shed light on Skoog's innovative platform, empowering landowners to tap into both carbon and forest products markets. Augusto, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
All right, so our company is called Skoog. It's a wordplay with the word Skoog in Norwegian and most Scandinavian language, which means forest. I think very nice introduction by Ignacio. I think we're going to be touching on some of the points he mentioned here, especially from the beginning here about the potential that forests and agriculture have to contribute to climate change. So perhaps contrary to popular belief, the potential on agriculture and forests to mitigate is actually bigger than the energy transition, because here with forests and agriculture, besides reductions, you also have the potential to actually capture carbon by changing agriculture practices, by changing the way forests are managed. So we see this as a huge potential. And then since we're talking about carbon credits, it can be a great source of generating carbon credits. The problem here, as also Ignacio mentioned, so he made a very good framing for us. There's a lot of problems both with quantity and quality. So this carbon markets have been around for around 25 years. And there's less than 500 projects or something around 500 projects in all this time. It's accelerating over the last couple of years because the demand has increased significantly. But now we are in a moment where we're talking more around quality, more and more around quality. So there's a lot of studies out there mentioning that, you know, around 90% of those projects have one form or another of quality issues. So I would say right now, that's the biggest problem to scale those markets. So when we started the company, we actually investigated a lot the reasons for these problems. So talking, for example, on perhaps touching on quantity first, we look into the process, the way it's done today. It's very manual. It's very time consuming. It's very costly. So we see projects, elaboration and registering of projects. It can cost up to 100,000, sometimes even more dollars. It can take up to 2 years from identifying, conceptualizing the project to issuing the credits. There's a lot of intermediate in the value chain. We're going to look into that in more detail in one of the next slides. So those are some of the reasons why supply has been a little bit constrained here. In terms of quality, we see problems like exaggerated claims about the impact of a project. some of those projects don't have what they call additionality, which are things that would have been done anyway, like timber companies planting trees, eucalyptus plantations, and claiming carbon credits for that. So there's double counting is a problem in the infrastructure that's happening less and less, but it used to be a problem. So all those things have made the credibility of this market go down. And when we started investigating the way those carbon project developers operate, we realized they're very low tech. It's very hard to actually get down to the data they use to estimate and calculate the carbon sequestration, the carbon avoidance on their projects. And it's really hard to pinpoint where things went wrong, if it was a fault on the project concept, if it was something during the verification. Because project developers are really, in many cases, they just a company that has several contractors working in the value chain. So we can see here a little bit the simplified value chain. So you have a landowner and you have a project developer who approach them and conceptualize a project. As I mentioned, they work a lot with contractors along the entire cycle, both to make measurements, to develop documentation, to do the field work. And then once a project is conceptualized and you have a document, it goes to independent verifiers. It goes to the registry, such as Vera, Gold Standard. Oftentimes you have brokers and speculator on the commercial part, and then finally the end buyers. So the end buyer is really hard to understand what they're buying sometimes and where to go when, for example, one of the projects are on the media, for example, for bad reasons, and they try to understand where things went wrong. So we see an accountability problem here as well. So here this is an animation I'm going to skip, but we see how tech is entering here and it's doing really good things for this market. I even mentioned, I think, especially here around auditing, that's been quite valuable because those companies are starting to rate those projects and separate the good from the not so good projects. We see more and more companies like Treemetrics, who's going to talk here after us, decreasing one of the problems Ignacio mentioned, the MRV, the monitoring, the verification and reporting. That's today very, very costly. So there's a lot of technology coming into reducing that. There are marketplaces helping on the commercial side of things. So, and there are companies here, very clever models building infrastructure for the carbon markets, but we don't see so many here on the early stage. We mentioned a couple here. This is not exhaustive by any means. And we see that this is where we need to see more and more companies, and we are seeing more and more companies, and we think it's going to be vital to unlock this market. You see here on the top, those are the ones we think that found a scalable, repeatable model of generating carbon credits. Nuri is a platform in the US. I think it's mostly with agriculture and carbon soil, similar to Carbon by Indigo. NCX is it's from forestry. So those are the models we admire, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So we're doing something that any landowner with a forest, with a farm, can enter those markets. So what we're trying to do essentially is make a more direct connect between the landowners and the buyers. We're going to be in the middle, intermediating everything and adding technology to speed things up and improve transparency, improve quality, and be a single point of accountability. We might not necessarily do the entire cycle, but we're going to be the custody. We're going to have the custody of the process from the beginning to the end. It's important to say here that the methodology, the way we see a bit different from those end-to-end platforms you mentioned, is not so much focused on a method, it's more around the farm. So we will look at all the property. So we look into every case, what type of credit or credits can be generated. We're not targeting, we're not trying to generate too many types of credits. So we're working with partners for some of the things that require very specific knowledge about how to measure and monitor and report. For example, enhanced rock weathering, biodiversity is a new one, and biochar. So we're more looking to do perhaps this side of the equation here, the ones related to forestry and agriculture. But even that, we're looking to have partners in our platform who can be vetted, and just there's a few small companies we think we could help scale with technology that we're going to develop. So to give an example, and that became very clear with our first sign-up farmer, this farm has forests that can be preserved. Eventually, they are being more and more deforested to expand this, in this case, is cattle, so to expand the pasture land here. So this person could be receive payments to keep that forest. So he has a pasture land here that can be integrated with trees and create a silver pasture system here. And he also has some degraded pasture land that could be restored. Not to mention, this is there are companies generating carbon credits with by spreading basaltic rocks into the soil, the process called enhanced rock weathering, and also biochar that needs to be included on as a substrate. So that could also be used. So just an example of how 5 different credits could potentially be generated if this person has access and several companies work together in making the most, both financially and environmentally, out of this property. So the way we see this working is a landowner just simply sign up. We would group, certify, and issue the credits, monitor the areas. And we work also with the commercialization of the credits. So we have commercial partners. It's very important to have commercial partners because we need an estimate. We need them to commit to a certain volume and a certain price, so we can understand the return that the farmers will have. Because in some cases they will need to make an investment, and we would need to make an investment in implementing, for example, an agroforestry system. So it's very important that we can have some a price guarantee to avoid the problem that happened in some other cases that we studied. So just to give a bit more detail on the solution here. So the platform would allow people to identify their areas. So we have algorithms that can segment and calculate what type of credits can be generated and give them an estimate of financial benefits they would have in implementing those systems. And in the same platform, and that's very important, the project developer would be working into grouping and developing the whole documentation and monitoring of the project. One of the barriers we see here, and it's good that we're talking about carbon, but we're also talking about all the forest products here. Those methods or those type of forest products are very specific. So you need a lot of knowledge of every region to understand what type of species could go into an area. So we also developing this, what we call LURE, or Land Use Recommendation Engine, which is essentially using AI to read up on lots of scientific studies from every region where we operate and understand what species would work in a certain site, given properties such as, rainfall, average temperature, the type of vegetation. So we would be able to recommend the species in a case here, for example, some bare fruiting trees that can be integrated with agricultural pasture land. That's to maximize both the revenue, but also the environmental returns for each land. So that would give an estimate of cost and benefit, so the person can understand how much investment is needed, and also what would be the return in carbon sequestration or avoidance, and also the cost to implement the system. We're also working on a visualization of the final result here. And that goes back to the method, because for every method you have a number of trees you need to plant per hectare, the spacing between the trees, the orientation. So because we don't want knowledge to be a barrier, and it's a barrier because if people know what they're doing, they would have done it already. So we want to create those sort of digital guides for implementation using augmented reality. This is actually something that my co-founder Nima already developed and has already showcased. And it's very interesting because you can see with augmented reality based on the actual site what the system is going to look like. So the team is obviously to do this is a very multidisciplinary team. So we have people with background in consulting, in technology, data science. We have a GIS developer. We have agronomists and foresters. And for every project we develop, we also have specialists on the area, right? So we have a project in the Amazon where we're working with Embrapa, which is a research institute, a couple of projects in the north of Minas Gerais, in the state in Brazil, where we have professors from local universities. And that's kind of key for us, right? To bring everybody into a common platform to scale those things and scale the knowledge. We're looking into other markets as well. We think there's a huge potential here, for example, in the Nordics, where there's a lot of forests that can be improved. There's a type of carbon credit called the improved forest management. So, but the principle is the same. It's just all about enabling anyone with land to be contributing to climate change by improving the way land is managed, and with more forest rather than less, and better managed forests. So we obviously won't do this alone. So we are raising a pre-seed round moment. We are looking for partners to be able to provide that commercial security to the landowners. So that would be off-takers. We're talking to a few companies, and also tech collaboration, because we are going to build a lot of since we're going to automate and digitize the entire cycle, but we are looking for smart solutions that we can integrate here, so we don't have to do some parts of the process.
Let's welcome Garrett Maloli, Operations Director at Treemetrics. He will be delving into how their Forest HQ Climate Smart platform supports the quantification, monitoring, and reporting of forest carbon. Garrett, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you all for the opportunity to present here. So, back to what Augusto was talking about. He gave kind of an overview of the market and the users that are there. But I suppose there's a lot of narrative in relation to the whole thing of accuracy and transparency, and that's probably giving a negative impact and a lot of narrative on greenwashing. And I suppose the fact of it is that the tools are not very digital, mainly paper-based, Excel-based type reports, and actually difficult to determine the credibility of the credit. And that's also then affecting the price of and the value of the credit to the landowner because of that grayness in the marketplace. And also, as Augusto said, it's an expensive process for the landowner to go through. It's time consuming. So what we're trying to help here is to digitize the certification process and also make it more efficient, but ultimately to reduce the cost to the landowner and the different stakeholders that are in the industry. So I won't spend much time on this slide because Augusto has already brought it up, but it just kind of gives you the general framework of the value chain. And I suppose where we're beginning to help more is in these two first steps, the project developers, but also the VVBs who are being asked to verify the projects that are coming on their table. So just to, just re-emphasize what MRV is about. So it's measurement, reporting, verification. So then it's multi-step to measure the amount of greenhouse gas emissions reduced by specific mitigation activity. So Augusto also mentioned you have your different methods that you can do, and it can be degradation of farmland, it can be changed management practices, but all of that task also requires a report and also needs continuous reporting over time. So that again is another time-consuming, costly exercise. And then you need your third parties that are there to verify the data that is available. So back to, again, I'd refer to Augusto's point again about the low take-up of projects is the time and just the resources and the people the actual physical people to do the work, to bring them on stream. So while the world is crying out for carbon projects to get implemented, it's actually very difficult and time consuming for them to happen. So that's where we've focused our effort on. So we have a digital platform called Forest HQ. Our world started back in forest measurement, and similar to that, satellite mapping, data integration, modeling, allometric equations, species modeling. So a lot of our background over the last 18 years has been in the actual data room and the presentation of the data. So if you want to talk about the life cycle requirements, you not only have you to take what the world was like today in that project area, but you also have to look historically as to what was there beforehand. So you cannot say that you are establishing a new forest crop if 3 years ago there was already a forest crop and it had been removed. So that's it all requires acquisition of satellite data and analysis of it. It also requires the measurement. You also need to show that what your measurements are based on, where they were located, geolocated, species, soil, climate, all of that. It also needs the continuous monitoring. So from a risk mitigation point of view, what is the risk of fire, for example, disease, all of the aspects that are becoming more common throughout the world. Then you have management practices such as deferred harvest. So, you have to show and prove and demonstrate that you've changed your management to acquire more carbon from the trees instead of selling the timber for forest products. And then on the forest product side of things, you have a value chain there also in relation to the carbon life cycle of the products. So what we do here is we support the actual project developers, both from a monitoring perspective, but also in the documentation and utilizing and selecting each of the methodologies that are out there. So there are numerous different methodologies that can be provided in the voluntary carbon market, predominantly provided through Verra and the gold standard. We then provide the actual forestry MRV service of the monitoring, reporting, and tools for the verification. We provide the data as with its transparency to help the market to understand the value of the credits, and then also to implement standards, and as standards improve over time, but also as standards may change over time. So I would say that probably the next phase of standards that will start to come in is not just in carbon, but will be related to biodiversity and nature protection. So in the tools that are available on the Forest HQ platform, you can create your custom project. That can be to a single landowner, or it could be to 1,000 landowners belonging to the one project. You then have tasks that are selected. You also have corrective actions that need to be implemented. And these corrective actions is also linked to like FSC and PEFC type forest certification. You have your documents, your forms, your reporting, and you also then, depending on the certificate that you are following, you will also have customized reporting for the marketplace also. We support mobile apps. We have our own field data collector app on Android, but we're also compatible with the Arboreal app, which is more a digital augmented reality application. And we also integrate with QField So QField is, for those people that may be familiar with QGIS as an open source GIS platform, QField is an offline data recording applications. So we synchronize with those applications also. So you're going to have different forms of data. You're going to have your UAV, LiDAR, satellite data. Each of those data sets are going to provide different resolutions, and linked to the different resolutions, you're going to have your different levels of accuracy. And really, the world has dramatically changed, certainly in the last 2 years, in relation to the availability of more high resolution data, also more mobile applications, etc., that can feed in data to it. So the platform is agnostic to the data that's provided. What we do is we structure the data for the users so that when it comes to the reporting afterwards, that it's easy to compare apples with apples. So this is just a couple of little quick screenshots. So you have on Forest HQ, you can customize and create your own dashboard, depending on the type of functionality that you may. So maybe forest management could similarly be linked to carbon inventory, harvesting, etc., forest certification. And then you have customized template tools that you can create your forms for data collection, how inventory, for example, if inventory has been provided by a third party, how that can be structured and streamlined into the process. The tab there, forest, is how you can load your forest. If there's an existing shapefile repository that you want to bring in or batch load data, that's there. Or you can singularly draw out your forest for a single landowner, then things related to licensing, etc., tasks and activities. So this, then you set up your project. So your project is, once you set it up, you get this line up here is your dashboard. So you'll start to create your own project. So you have, so for each project that you have, each of them will have their own card here. So when you select on them, or you can filter by typing in their names, it will bring you to the location. And then based on the methodology selected or the documentation that is requested, you can have your customized fields here. So, and here then is your QField tab, that if you want to select that for offline, when you're out either doing an audit or collecting information with the landowner, that data can be collected on a mobile phone and tablet and synchronized back with the system as well. I suppose the difficulty currently in the marketplace is that there is no real cross-reference between what the documentation says and what the actual spatial representation of the forest is telling you. So the report will say there's 1,000 hectares of forest land. We are going to do A, B, and C of planting tree species, or improving the soils, or improve forest management. But where those activities relate to, there's nothing out there. There's a PDF map, but you cannot easily reference. So that was one of the things that we focused on here, was the cross-reference of your actual spatial information, as well as all of your document information here. And then back to the availability of different EO data sets. So you can also then start to bring in different data sets. So here's an example of where we overlay a Playday's Airbus data onto the background imagery, Google Earth imagery. So now you can start to select your time ranges for change detection, but also looking at that baseline information, and also looking at the historical information of the forest. So all of these tasks are extremely time consuming from the accreditation bodies and also the verifiers and auditors. So we're focused on how do we improve that workflow? How do we improve people's time? How do we make people's time more efficient, that they can actually accredit and audit more forests or more projects in a faster time period? And then again, you know, based on the level of information, EO data, you know, we can run some algorithms over the data using AI techniques that are out there for tree detection and crown detection. So once we have that, link that with the field plot data telling us the species and trees that are there, plugging that with the allometric equations to give the carbon calculations. This then, we also have the functionality on the platform for your PFC and FSC certification. So based on the templates, in particular at a PFC level, where they are changed between countries, is to enable certification under one standard, but to have the flexibility at regional or country level. And you know, on the forest inventory, you know, we've automated reporting, the implementation of growth modeling. We also can run harvest simulation. So if it is improved forest management, so you could say based on the inventory today, this is the log breakout that you'll get from your forest. If you delay your harvesting over time, what is the change in log products from that forest? Because these are also important questions to the wider forest industry in relation to wood supply and log availability. And then you can start to feed in values into the system in order to get an estimate of forest valuation. So one of the things we're most proud about is the integration of the data and reporting. So you can run your reports on the Forest HQ platform, but also you can export the data either digitally or as PDF reports if you want to utilize it in any other third-party applications. So we are not tying the user to Forest HQ solely. They can utilize X-Tasks functionalities, and if they want to take that data, run in their own systems, that's absolutely okay from our point of view also. The harvest monitoring piece was related to deferred harvesting and improved forest management. We can start to, we've analysed the production files from the machine and show you where harvesting has taken place, and also the log variation within the supply chain. So I suppose I'll just leave you that it's a highly flexible system. We set up the platform for each organization. So depending on the organization's requirements, that's customized to them. That includes how their data is structured, for example, inventory, mapping files. If they have existing LiDAR, for example, third-party LiDAR, that can all be brought into it. So our next phase of work is working in relation to nature and biodiversity, because we think that that's ultimately one of the highest indicators to the general public of what they like to see happening in the forest. How has the forest activity affected my water? How has it affected my flora and fauna that are there? So that's our next piece of work. So I suppose we're back to efficient, collaborative, but also secure. So we run our system all in the Amazon cloud service, and that can be set up to the customer's own location. So be it America, be it South America, be it Europe, be it Scandinavia. So thank you for your time, and certainly feel free to contact us at treemetrics.com, and we'd be very happy to talk in more detail.